Now we're going to move on to Trend Corner. We have two topics we want to discuss today. One that I'm bringing up, one you have as well, Yaniv, I believe. Just to remind everybody, the Trend Corner is not necessarily breaking news, but it's some kind of meta trend or under-discussed theme or topic that we think deserves a little bit of attention, that we want to discuss and debate it. We want to think about it with the audience. We want you to join us in the comments and opine about it. And so it's maybe a little bit less topical, although it can be topical, but a little bit more broader, a little bit more meta, a little bit more connecting the dots. The first one I wanted to discuss was actually something that Chamath said on the recent All In podcast, which I thought was really interesting. I have a lot of problems with some of those guys and some of what they say, but I thought this one was an interesting one. He described some of the MAGA movement, in his continuous effort to try to justify and find value in what Trump does. He described it as moving from a world of blurred lines to a world of clear, bright, dividing lines. And I thought that was an interesting framing. So the examples that I might give for this, he gave some of these examples and different examples, is moving from this world of like, we're just not really sure if Bitcoin is okay and if it's going to be part of the financial system or not. And we'll sort of litigate it through the courts to Bitcoin is good, Bitcoin is regulation, Bitcoin strategic reserves, Bitcoin is okay and is part of the financial system. We're going to clarify where you stand with Bitcoin. Moving from, this one is an interesting one. And by the way, I'm not saying these are good things, and I'm not saying these are actually what Trump's trying to do. I'm not saying these are actually things Trump should do, but I do think they're consequences, intended or otherwise. Another example here is US aid. US aid is really, if you think about it, and it's no secret, it's been used as an instrument of foreign policy, right? Like, we'll give you money if you follow our values, or we'll give you money so you're beholden to us, and we're going to also set up a military base there. Or you can't say no to us when we want to go to war, and we want you to join us because, hey, by the way, half your country is funded by our US aid system. So there's this kind of blurry line between US aid and foreign policy and military policy. And so what he's saying is that Trump is like going, fuck that. We don't need to support these people. We're just going to be might through right. Foreign policy is foreign policy. Military is military. Aid is aid. He's talking about the separation between Europe and the US. It's like, it's not this weird Western conglomerate. There is the US and there is Europe, and we don't need to be all conflated together in all blurry lines of interdependence. I'm adding to the list Israel-Palestine. There's this kind of blurry line of like, well, the US is this independent broker and it's a mediator and a moderator and a blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, fuck off. Israel, we support Israel. We're going to move the capital over here. We're going to suspend thing over there. We're going to take over Gaza over there. It's like Israel is the answer. They're our partner, full stop. Ukraine and Russia. It's like, well, we want to support Ukraine, but we're not in the war, but we're supporting Ukraine, and we're not really sure where it's going to go, and we don't want to let them die, but we don't want to start World War III. It's like, no, fucking end the war. It's over. We're done. Clarify the lines. We're not going to just keep supporting this war with this vague outcome. He also went on to talk about gender, right? There's no longer a spectrum of gender. I'm not saying I believe in this or advocate for this, but he's saying on this trend is, no, there's only two genders, male, female. That's what they're saying. And I'm also adding this idea of like, why are we going to hire people? We're going to hire them for DEI. We're going to hire them for rebalancing quotas, no, we're only going to hire them for meritocracy. We're going to remove all other information from the equation. So again, I'll summarize by saying I'm not saying these things are good or bad. I'm not saying they're intended or unintended. I'm not saying that Trump has this theory of mind to clarify boundary conditions in the world. I'm saying this just seems to be what is happening. And it's a very interesting observation that might help you understand the world a bit in this crazy, chaotic era.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. I mean, it strikes me as a load of bollocks. I don't even accept the premise. Like, to use example of the Ukraine-Russia situation, we actually moved from a very clear line, which is Russia is the aggressor and Ukraine has a right to defend its territorial integrity, and we will support them to, I don't even know what, but it certainly isn't a nice, clear line.
that's what I'm saying. We'll support them to I don't know what is that, like, where does this go? But hang on, I want to talk about that just for a second, just because why not? It's our podcast and we can talk about whatever we want.
Mm.
Everyone on the left is saying, the big problem with the Trump Russia, Ukraine meeting in the Oval Office is Trump is forgetting who the aggressor is, and why are we now relitigating who the aggressor is? And no, Russia is the aggressor. And I just think this is entirely missing the point.
Is it?
I don't think Trump talks very much about who the aggressor is at all. He doesn't, every now and then he will say Zelensky was stupid or NATO was stupid or, Russia had some reasons. But that's not the thrust of his argument. Trump does and says a lot of stupid fucking things. For harping on who the aggressor is not his point. His point is, I don't care who the aggressor is. I don't care who's right. I want the killing to stop, and I'm willing to give up Ukrainian territory for it to stop. And I don't care about the long-term ramifications of that in terms of sovereign territory, sovereign integrity, European encroachment. I don't give a fuck. I want the war to stop. I want the people to stop dying. That's what he's saying.
That's what he's saying, but it's not what he means. Like, I think it would take an extreme level of naivety to think that Donald Trump gives a shit about people being killed over in Ukraine. I don't know what he's playing at, but he sure is acting like a Russian asset to me. Like, it is not that he wants people to stop dying. It's that he is actually parroting Russian propaganda to basically allow them to keep the territorial gains. And it is appeasement at best. And that tends not to work very well.
I think that's perfect. I think what we both said coexist perfectly fine. He could be a Russian asset. He could be screwing up the theory of territorial sovereignty, NATO, whatever, European defense. All of that can be true. And he is not using the argument of, well, Ukraine was the aggressor or Russia was not the aggressor, therefore. He's using, and so I don't know why liberals keep saying, no, Russia was the aggressor and Donald Trump is not believing that. That's not his argument. So why do we keep going back to that? It's like he's saying, I don't care who the aggressor is. And so it just seems like a really weak argument. Let's say that he's a Russian asset. Let's say he doesn't understand territorial integrity. Let's say he doesn't understand the defense of Europe and why it's in the US's best interest. But let's not harp on this question of, like, Donald Trump doesn't know that Russia was the aggressor. Who fucking cares? He knows they're the aggressor. Doesn't need to go say it every 5 minutes.
Well, I mean, okay, I profoundly disagree with what you're saying, because I think you're giving Donald Trump altogether way too much credit based on his actions. So, but I also think you're giving Chamath way too much credit, who is a craven toady for Trump. And his sophistry here, where he's saying that we've moved from a world of blurred lines to clear lines. No, we've just moved from a world where there is an attempt at morality to a world where there are these arbitrary distinctions based on Donald Trump's caprice, based on what his backers think they want to improve their own wealth and power. It's very reductionist, and to say that there's a sort of new way of thinking other than authoritarianism and corruption is just not something I buy.
No, so here's the thing, actually. I think this articulation of the framework, which is like this moving from blurred lines to bright boundaries, is a very correct insight. Where I think he's wrong, I think his insight is correct. I think where he's wrong is the implications of that. The world has blurry lines because the world is complicated. It is not reductive and black and white. And so where he might be describing it as a positive thing, I would describe it as a negative thing. That it's a reductionist, reductive, black and white, unnuanced view of the world. So I don't think the argument against Chamath's worldview is that he's wrong. I think he's right in his observation. He's wrong in the implication that it's a dumb way of thinking about the world.
I mean, I just don't even necessarily think it's true, but like it's sophistry to me, right? You can say, oh, look, that was a blurry line, this is a clear line, or you can say we've just prioritized different things, right? I just don't see that there's a sudden clarity. Like, where's the clear line in Doge? Like, Doge is just a complete shit show, right?
Oh, that's why I didn't include Doge in my list of examples.
Well, yeah, okay, but then it's sort of like cherry picking in a sense. I just think that it's a much better explanation for Trump's actions are a combination of his own narcissism and the greed and the corruption of those he has surrounded himself with. I think that has much more explanatory power than clear lines and blurry lines.
I don't know why you would describe it as sophistry. I think if there is if this is one of the byproducts of Trump's behavior, that is useful to note. I'm not saying it explains the behavior. I'm not saying it's his intent, but I am saying it is one of the consequences. We can certainly and may certainly want to go upstream to understand the root causes of why he's behaving that way. And I agree with you. It's some combination of um, power, hunger, and capriciousness. And that's right. The consequences of which are this two-dimensional black and white hard lines from things that were once blurrier and more intertangled and more nuanced and subtle, for better or for worse. And I think for the most part, for worse. I think, let me tell you where some of it is for better, and it's counterintuitive, perhaps. You and I have had episodes about Israel Palestine. We've talked about how you're Israeli, I'm Palestinian. I actually think for better, there is an argument to be made that a clarifying of the lines that the U.S. supports Israel. U.S. has really very little interest in being an honest broker between the two. I think that's been true for decades. And I think the sophistry is there. The sophistry has been damaging, dangerous, and destructive. And it has kept a group of people with false hope, and radicalized them and injured them no end. And I think saying, no, actually, Jerusalem is off the table. No, actually, your sovereignty is off the table. No, actually, the Abraham Accords means you guys have no power. The Arab world doesn't give a fuck about you. And actually, it's over. And so you now need to find a way to integrate or get along. Now, this is a very, 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 a very unpopular opinion on the pro-Palestinian side. But actually, we just need to move forward from here. You have nothing. You will get nothing. What next? I think that is enormously clarifying for the people that are living in quiet desperation, living in false hope. And so I actually think there are positive consequences for that. Actually, I shouldn't say quiet desperation, loud desperation.
Loud desperation. Yeah.
All right. So this is a heated one. That was Chamath's thoughts. This was some of the examples. Is this just reverse engineering Trump's chaos? Is this just sophistry, or is this an interesting worldview that helps clarify your decision making? Jump down in the comments and let us know your thoughts.